Welcome back to Smite Guides, and today we're talking about Anhur after playing him in every single lane in the world of Smite Conquest. We're not going to talk about the fact that I just recorded an entire video without pressing the record button, so 25 minutes I'll never get back of my life. Very gut-wrenching experience to look over and see that the red button is not active, but that is okay. We'll go into this again and go over Anhur. He's one of the gods that I didn't get into too much in my Smite years. I got him to Mastery 1 and then I just kind of left him there. He didn't really suit the playstyle I was in. His unique, very unique kit was kind of weird for me. He has a very high skill ceiling, and he's also one of those gods that's either very popular or not popular at all. You either see him or you don't. Right now you don't see him too often. It depends on how the meta changes and what the current meta builds are, what's strong and what's not. You don't see him in the new attack speed crit meta just because he's not the best attack speed god. So you don't see him often there, though he can be played very well if positioned properly and if you know how his combos work. I feel like he can be very strong against the current meta, though it really just depends on how you play him. So getting into his abilities, we'll talk about his passive first. His passive is basically very simple. It's a walking executioner buff where if he hits someone with a spear, he reduces their physical protections by 20. I believe it's just physical protections. Yeah, it's physical. So he reduces their physical protections by 20. Very simple, don't have to talk about that one too much. Going into his 1, it's an obelisk that he throws down. Anybody walking through the sand at max level gets slowed to 35%, which is very significant slow, though it's not immune to people being able to dash out or leap out, so they are easily able to get out of it. If they do have their dash or leap, probably save it for your entire combo, which works very well together. His 2 is an impale, where he throws a spear out and sticks them into any solid object. They'll get stunned for 1.5 seconds, as well as taking damage. Pairs up well with his obelisk, where you can pin them in the sand. You do get increased damage by 20% at max level if you're standing in the sand. So the slow, including the impale and the increased damage, all work very well together with beating someone up as you have him pinned down. Again, his abilities with used all together are very disruptive, which is really good because you can beat someone up the entire time to the point where once they realize what's happening, they're already at half health or maybe lower. So that's really good. His leap is a knock up. This basically just pops them up in the air. It's very slow, and then you can use your other abilities to pin them to something and then also beat them up during that. Maybe throw your tower down afterwards so you get the increased damage. I'm not the guy that can, pull off Anhur abilities perfectly in a row. I can't leap into a pin into his obelisk all at once. I don't have the skill ceiling for that, not for Anhur at least. There are gods that I can do some weird combos on, but definitely not Anhur, not yet. But those, just to keep in mind, that's something that a lot of people that are very proficient with Anhur will do, and you see that a lot. For his ultimate, it's just a missile ultimate. He throws off 8 spears very quickly. They do a lot of damage. You want to consecutively hit them. You'll chunk someone down, especially if you find someone at low health. It's a good finisher. He's CC during that time as well, so if you need to get out of something like an Ares chain pull or like a Baron ult, you can use that to get out. I'll go over here to a Guan bot and show you kind of what his whole combo looks like. Leaping into someone and doing the increased damage from the obelisk and having the pin. It's very good, especially if you're able to get a 1v1 fight into that. I guess in some circumstances, maybe a group fight works well with the obelisk, though he's very single target when you think about his kit. That will actually bring us really good into our roles. His roles, starting from worst to best, I'm going to start with support, just because I feel like even if you build him as a full tank, he's still going to be a bit squishy, which is going to be the case for most people that aren't guardians or warriors. But he's going to be a bit squishy. And then his abilities, yes, they do have some CC, but in the case of like single target, not necessarily mass, though you can use his obelisk to slow multiple people. If they have any type of dash or leap, they're getting through it very quickly. So doesn't work too well. You have his pin, but it's single target. You can pull somebody out of a fight. So if it's like one person chasing another person or 2 people chasing another person, maybe you can save someone's life, but in an endgame group fight, it doesn't work too well. You have his knock up, which you can disrupt some people chasing or maybe, bring into a group fight, which is okay. But you're only going to get a couple people probably, unless all 5 people are for some reason standing in this little bitty circle, and it's very slow. So not notably, none of his abilities are that great with the whole peeling or just in general, using them to help your teammates out. So mainly just his obelisk. And then his ultimate is rendered useless if you're built as a tanky support. I mean, maybe if you find someone caught out with 50, 100 health or something, you'll kill them, but maybe you'll scare a team if they don't realize you're the tank and you throw your ultimate out, and then you could scare them away with it, and then you can get yourself out of stuff, but that's really it. So his ultimate's useless in the support role. So that's why support sits so low. I don't feel like he jives too well with anybody. Maybe in the early game when he's just on the duo lane, he works pretty good. But once you come into the group in the end game, he's not very useful. Mainly just hurting your team at that point. Going into the next one is probably going to be the mid lane. I feel like he doesn't do too well in mid lane, as most hunters don't do too well in the mid lane. You see a couple that do okay. You know, your Neiths and your Ishtar can do pretty well in the mid lane. But Anhur, not so much. I feel like he does have a good kit for surviving in the middle of the map, where he's going to get, you know, pressured a lot. He's got his leap and his ultimate for the CC, where he can get in and out of combat. But when it comes to clear, he's never going to clear as fast as a mage can with one ability. Definitely in the early game, I don't think you start clearing a full wave with his 2 until, like, I don't know, level 15 maybe. If you build him all ability-based damage, which is what I probably go for in the mid lane, even then it's kind of lackluster. So he's going to get out farmed in the mid lane. He's probably going to get pressured for the side camps. So for that reason, I don't think he's too well suited there. And then in most cases where you would think an Anhur with the mobility that he has would be able to get to and from and out of the jungle into other lanes to help out, he's probably going to get outmaneuvered by the mage, just because he's going to be fighting for his farm the whole time. So I think he doesn't do too well in the mid lane, so that takes him out of that position. After this point forward, I had fun with these roles, but not necessarily the greatest. Jungle is okay. Again, a fun role to play Anhur in. It's a double-edged sword, though. I feel like he does very good with ganking because his kit is very disruptive, especially in the solo lane, which is where the popular ganks are happening right now. With his reduced protections into many warriors, he's going to do really well. Being able to come into a fight, catch someone off guard with the knock up and then the pin, and then doing the increased damage from the obelisk and slowing them, and then being able to finish with the ult. I think he does very well with ganking. Where he doesn't do well is his farming in the jungle, where he's definitely going to get out farmed, especially in the early game. He's going to have to fight for his life when it comes to farm and his levels. And most assassins are just going to pressure you into your jungle and start stealing your farm. Even though you can maneuver very well, it takes quite a while to take your farm out. So I feel like that's where he falls off in the jungle lane. Again, very strong ganker, but not so necessarily very good in the farming aspect of it. So I feel like at some point you're going to fall behind in levels, and you're not going to do so well as the assassin. So there's that. Going into the next two, I feel like these are pretty much a tie. I feel like carry and solo, he does well in both lanes. If you know how to play Anhur, you're going to do very well in both lanes. Solo, he just naturally has a good place there because his passive allows you to reduce protections in the current meta. Everyone's building Glad Shield and full, you know, tank builds into the power hybrid build. So he does really well brawling. He has the ranged attacks, which are really good, with poking out the warriors who have to get in your face, and then you have the pin that keeps them away from you. You have the slow from your obelisk. You have your leap to knock him up. If the assassin comes over to gank you, you have your CC to get out, you have your leap to get out. So he does really well in the solo lane. He does really well with the objectives on solo side, so Pyro is going to be really good, especially, you know, most of the times you need to bring the hunter over, the mage over to take Pyro, whereas with Anhur, he's going to be able to take that with just the tank itself, just because he's a hunter. So that's good. Fighting for farm, I don't think is going to be a problem for the solo lane, so I think he does really well there. Tied up with the carry lane, I think is fine as long as you know how to use him. Never enter into a fight with face-to-face basics. You're going to lose against most hunters if you're just going basic for basic. But if you can get on top of a hunter with his entire kit and disrupt them and get the pin off first and do some damage first, then at that point you'll probably win, because by the time they're out of the stun for the 2, you've probably half-healthed them, if not, you know, taking them down to a quarter health, which is nice. And then at that point you have the advantage, as long as you don't hit, you know, don't get stunned off by like a Neith stun or something like that. You should be able to win that fight, especially if you have your ultimate. So if played correctly, I feel like you can outmaneuver the hunters. He does really well with objectives too, so Gold Fury is going to be fine. He's not going to fight for his farm too much. He should be fine with rotating onto his purples and any buffs that he has freely out in his jungle. So I think it's fine. Now you do want to build him in a way in the jungle that, or in the carry lane, that allows you to clear out your lane a little bit faster, which we'll get into builds here in just a second. But yeah, solo and carry I feel like are tied off. Maybe solo takes the cake just a little bit because of his passive. So yeah, I would say solo is probably the top there, and then carry follows that. So that goes into his roles and where he belongs. Then we'll go into, well, I will say this first before we get in too far into the builds. Solo lane is great early to mid game. Towards the late game, you're going to fall off, because once you group up, you're having, I'm a very big stickler for the solo lane either being a power mage or a warrior, just because having that additional tank coming into, you know, a tankier person that does a little bit of damage coming out of the solo lane. So you have 2 frontmen, 2 peelers, Two brawlers, you know, beefcakes in the front line is nice, or having someone that does a bunch of AoE damage very quickly, also nice coming from the solo lane. So for that reason, solo is like it falls off definitely towards the late game. But if you can pressure really early and get a very early game lead, then at that point you become very valuable. You just don't want the game to extend out too far. Definitely probably not until level 20, then everyone's grouped up, and you know, team for team, as long as the other team's good, you're probably going to lose. So there's that. So going into builds, I guess we'll talk about the one I have built here already first. This is the mid build that I'd probably go for. There's something a little ability based, going into some attack speed towards the end, where you'll do some damage to the tanks a little bit more, but this is going to be very strong for abilities, getting the tick damage from Broche and from Crusher to help you clear out your wave. Transcendence for the power and mana that you're going to need for your abilities. Jotun's Cunning for the cooldowns, especially off of the passive. You have Heart Seeker that's going to help you with your abilities and your power. Bunch of penetration and power here, which is nice. And then the Quisai, which helps you with high health people towards the end, tick them down. So this is a good mid build, I feel like. This is kind of a weird build. I'd say that you probably stick to his main build, which I'll go over when I go over carry, and a couple of the others that you build with a couple small changes. But this is probably something that you could build and do fine in the mid lane. I think I built something similar to this in the mid lane, so I feel like this would work out pretty well. Going into the carry lane, his main build, this is going to be pretty straightforward, pretty simple, with a kind of weird tweak to it, I'd say. For obviously, you go Death's Toll into Death's Embrace for the sustain. Getting the mana and the health back is really nice, especially since you're very ability based. Getting that mana back is going to be nice. And then you'd go into I definitely built this, and I probably would build it every time because his clear is not the best, especially in the early game. You want to be able to clear on par with everybody. So Odysseus's bow is really nice. You get the increased attack speed, and you get the lightning strikes that go down the line to help you clear out. Maybe get some pokes off of the hunters that you're, fighting with the lane for. And then you build something like Crusher for the tick damage to help you clear out as well, get you some more attack speed and build some of that penetration up, some power. And then you'd go into just your typical crit builds, Shadow Steel, Deathbringer, going into Malicious Deathbringer, which is going to give you cooldowns on crit strikes, which is good for your abilities. And then building something like Wind Demon for the additional attack speed, finish off your crits, so you're hitting crits pretty much every time. And then also gives you some more penetration, which is good. So this would probably be my go-to in the build that I found that worked very well on him in the carry lane. I'd also build this probably in the jungle, just substituting out Death's Embrace. Not that Death's Embrace isn't a good starter for the jungle because of the sustain, but just getting the additional damage on the jungle. Building something like Eye of the Jungle to get the wards as well as the attack speed is nice. So this would work out pretty good. So that would be my jungle build. Nothing really changes there. And then going into solo and support. Solo, you can build the exact same build as well, though I do like to. There's something I thought about. I didn't do this in my video, though I thought about it afterwards for solo, which we'll get into. First, we'll talk about his support build, which is pretty straightforward. Benevolence into Animosity for the additional attack damage, basic attack damage based on your health in the end game if you're able to get to level 20. And then all based on health items. You build Gauntlet, which is the go-to support item right now. And then you go into all aura-based items. So you build stuff like Sovereignty for physical protection, Shoguns for increased attack speed, which will help you as well being a hunter. And then go into, Heartward would be a good one if you wanted to build another physical protection item towards the end. You could go Heartward and then get Amulet of the Stronghold, so some of your physical protections turn into magical protections. If you're having trouble with anti-heal, you can go Contagion for the physical protection prot into Stronghold. If you're having trouble with anti-heal, you can go into Emperor's Armor. If you're having an aggressive game and you're playing into their towers, or not an aggressive game and you're getting pushed back to your towers, you get that buff or debuff on the towers, so that's nice. So just a couple items to consider there for his support build, but something along these lines would work really well. Again, you could substitute that out for Contagion for the anti-heal as well. So something to consider for support, but this is probably my go-to, something either substituting this out for Emperors or Contagions for him and the support lane. For the solo lane, we will talk about the starter item first. Death's Toll into Death's Embrace is always a great starter item for the solo lane, especially if you're playing into a hunter, or if you're playing a hunter into a warrior. That gives you the sustain and the mana for health that you need as well. So it allows you to stay on lane a little bit longer. You could also build Mannequin Scepter, which is okay, a little bit stronger in the late game, where you get the Mannequin Hidden Blade when you come into a fight and you haven't taken damage in a little while. You get that increased immediate damage off of whoever you hit, which is nice. But again, you could just build Death's Toll into Death's Embrace and then go into the complete build that I just built. Though I would consider an item, and I just want to mention this, not that I did this, but I feel like it would be really sick. Building a Runeforge hammer on her would be good, because you get the health, you get the sustain from the HP 5 and MP 5, a little bit of power, and then anybody hit by your Impale would get 20% increased damage. So that's an item that I think could work pretty well on her. But still go into the same type of build that I built on the carry lane, where you'd probably build like Crusher, and maybe probably go Crusher first instead of Runeforge. You could, like I said, you could take Runeforge out and just build the Odysseus' bow for the clear if you needed to. But something like this, and then going into the same thing, straight out crit build. You could go into more of a heavier penetration build, since you're going into somebody with physicals as well, but he gets his passive already, so I don't know if you need to necessarily do that. You could go something like a heavy Deathbringer, and then go into like Huisai and then Executioner if you wanted to double up on the protection prots, but not necessary. You could just build the typical, you know, anti-heal Shadow Steal, so because a lot of people love going life steal right now on the solo lane. But this would be just a strong build if you wanted to do that. You could also just sell these out, not go any more crit other than Deathbringer, and then go into like Heartseeker if you wanted to. But that's just an idea. So this would be probably my solo build, you know, just playing around with Runeforge Hammer. I might even try a game where I do it just to see how it works. But that finishes up on her. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like I said, if you are new here, I've said this in a couple videos now, and you enjoyed the content and you plan on coming back, leaving a subscribe lets me know that I'm doing well, and again lets me know that you're going to come back. So it lets me know, hey, keep on track. And liking videos as well lets me know, hey, that video did well. So I'm going to rant just a little bit here. I've been, you know, some of my videos aren't the same when it comes to music volume and how my mic sounds, because the equalizer, I've been messing with it to see what sounds the best and what doesn't. I'm trying to keep a softer tone so it's not like maxing my mic out or anything like that. But just in general, my audio is going to change significantly as we get into the deeper videos. And liking a video lets me know, okay, the audio must have been good. The music must have sounded right. It wasn't overpowering the gameplay, but the gameplay wasn't too loud and you couldn't just barely hear the music and stuff like that. So I've been thinking about that a lot and trying to find a nice spot that's just right in the middle, where the music's loud enough to enjoy, but the gameplay can still be heard, the calls can still be heard, so you understand what's happening. And then for the videos where I talk a lot, like this one, how the mic sounds overall. So just stuff like that. Liking videos lets me know, okay, this video must have been good overall, because there's a lot of likes on it. And then anybody that wants to come back, you know, subscribing just lets me know, okay, I'm having people that are enjoying the content and they want to see when I post and such. So things like that. Other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope I, you know, did well in explaining everything. If you have any questions or, you know, any criticism as well, leave it in the comments and let me know so that I know what I can do better. But I hope you guys enjoyed, and this has been Bri Cry.